One of the most powerful moments in Breath of the Wild, maybe even the entire Legend of Zelda series, is when Zelda embraces Link, holding onto him as he clings to life, refusing to let him go. She reassures him, perhaps even herself, that he's going to be okay. But Link, with the last of his strength, can only look at her with apologetic eyes before his spirit fades. It's such an intense, heartbreaking scene, but did you know that in the original Japanese version, Zelda's words carry an entirely different nuance? The core emotion is still there, but what she says and how she says it adds another layer to her relationship with Link. I want to be clear, this video is not about critiquing the official English localization. Instead, I will provide alternative translations alongside my own interpretations to explore how these differences complement each other and what they tell us about Zelda and Link's connection, the silent bond they both share, the emotions they struggle with, and how their stories intertwine through duty, destiny, and something far more personal. The very first of Link's recovered memories tell events of before the Calamity, before everything fell apart. Link has just been appointed as the hero, and Zelda doesn't exactly seem thrilled about the whole situation. Right from this moment, her emotions are clear. There's a sense of distance between her and Link. Her tone remains formal as she recites the ceremonial prayer. Still, her words feel heavy and are likely clouded by her frustration and perhaps even resentment. There's no warmth in her voice. Instead, there's a tension that lingers in her words. This is the first chronological glimpse of Zelda's internal struggle, a battle between duty, expectation, and her own personal frustrations. Urbosa's words in this scene also leave quite the impact. She acknowledges that, to Zelda, the knight chosen by the Master Sword is a constant reminder of everything she's failed to achieve. In what is fittingly titled Zelda's Resentment, we see just how distant her relationship with Link has become. She's cold and dismissive, barely acknowledging his presence, and when she does, it's with sharp words and clear frustration. Her anger isn't just about Link though, it's about herself. She's frustrated with her own failures, and seeing Link only reinforces those feelings. So rather than facing that pain, she continues to push him away. Central to Japanese culture are the concepts of Giri and Ninjo. At its core, Giri is about duty, obligation, and social expectations, the things you're supposed to do because society, tradition, or status demands it. It's the weight of responsibility, the role you have to play, even if it conflicts with what you personally want. On the other hand, Ninjo is about personal emotions and human feelings. It's the raw, emotional side of things, what you truly feel deep down, even if it goes against what's expected of you. These two forces are often in conflict, especially in traditional Japanese stories about samurai, and we see this dynamic reflected throughout Zelda's journey in Breath of the Wild. As a sacred princess, she carries the Giri of her royal duty to awaken her power and protect her kingdom. But as a person, she wrestles with her own Ninjo, her self-doubt, her frustrations, her fear of the future, and perhaps even her desire to be something more than just what has been dictated to her. The heart of her struggle is explained by Urbosa in a later memory. As Zelda rests on Urbosa's lap, the Gerudo chief turns to Link, asking how things are going between them. She definitely knows Zelda well, perhaps better than most, and sees the unspoken tension between them. When Link doesn't respond, Urbosa simply smiles, remarking that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. She elaborates that Zelda's frustration isn't just about Link. It is about herself. Every time she sees Link carrying the sword that chose him, it's a painful reminder of her own failure. No matter how hard she tries, her power remains out of reach. From her perspective, Link, the Silent Knight, has effortlessly stepped into his role, fulfilling his duty without struggle, while she remains trapped in hers, unable to move forward. However, something shifts in Zelda's heart in the subsequent memory. Up until now, Link has been nothing more than a silent knight, an obligation forced upon her, a living reminder of her shortcomings. But when the Yiga clan ambushes her and she finds herself alone, Link rushes to her aid without hesitation. In that instant, he is not just following orders or acting out of duty, he moves because he chooses to. This, I believe, is the first time Zelda truly sees a glimpse of Link's Ninjo, his personal unspoken emotions made clear through action. And while we don't know exactly why Zelda was alone or why Link was not with her, given Link's earlier conversation with Urbosa, it's possible that she played some role in purposely creating this distance between them. In Japanese culture, actions associated with Ninjo are often described as spontaneous and pure, and Link, who rarely expresses himself with words, reveals everything through what he does. While his duty as Zelda's appointed knight is a role bound by Giri, his actions in this moment suggest something more. His response is not just obligation, it's instinctive, driven by something deeper. Link is quick and decisive. He chooses to protect Zelda in the moment. His Ninjo is present here, even if it's subtle. When Zelda sees Link act, not out of duty, but out of instinct and willingness, something changes. For the first time, Zelda stops seeing him as just a silent knight, a burden tied to her fate. Instead, she begins to see a connection. Maybe in some way they are alike. I think it's important to highlight something Urbosa also makes clear. Zelda isn't rejecting her duty. She's devastated because no matter how hard she tries, she is unable to fulfill it. In the Shelter from the Storm memory, Zelda and Link take cover from the rain beneath the twisted roots of an ancient tree, as sheets of water blur the world outside, perhaps reflecting Zelda's inner state. The weight of everything is evident in her posture and voice. In the English version, Zelda frames her words as a hypothetical realization.
What if one day you realized that you just weren't meant to be a fighter?
The phrasing she uses suggests an internal discovery, as if talent is something that gradually becomes clear over time. She then reflects on how, despite this, Link would still be expected to follow the path set for him simply because of his lineage. This all builds up to her final question that she asks him.
I wonder then, would you have chosen a different path?
The words she uses to express herself feel to me like Zelda is questioning whether fate is something that can be altered, and perhaps whether someone should follow an obligation they were born into, or whether they can forge their own way forward. In the Japanese version, Zelda's wording is slightly different, carrying a stronger sense of inevitability.
もしもあなたに剣の才能が全くなくて。
Instead of suggesting that Link realized he wasn't meant to be a fighter, the key difference here is that she isn't describing self-discovery, she's describing inability, something beyond Link's control. Her final question reflects this shift.
あなたはどうしていたと思いますか?
She isn't asking whether he would have chosen a different destiny, she's asking how he would have handled being trapped in a role he could not fulfill. In English, Zelda's reflection implies whether circumstances could have been different, whether fate is something that can be altered. There seems to be a slightly stronger emphasis on personal choice, aligning with themes of individual freedom. While this arguably subtly shifts the nuance, it still very much preserves the emotional core, Zelda's feelings of inadequacy and her search for understanding. In Japanese, Zelda's question seems to have a little more of an element that focuses on the struggle of following one's family legacy or destined path without the ability to succeed, rather than simply choosing a different one. Both versions reflect her insecurities, making the moment deeply personal. She projects her struggles onto Link, seeking reassurance without directly asking for it. Zelda isn't rejecting her Giri or duty, she wants to fulfill it, but without the power she was meant to inherit, she's lost. She isn't looking for an escape, she's searching for an answer. Yet that answer is still not to come, as shortly after, in one of the following memories, everything changes in an instant. Suddenly, the ground trembles, the sky is swallowed by a violent red, and Calamity Ganon erupts from beneath Hyrule Castle. In the chaos, Urbosa urges Zelda to get to safety, but Zelda resists. In Japanese, she specifically emphasizes her desire to stay with everyone despite knowing that she is powerless to help, and in English, she appeals that there must be something she can do. But despite her resolve, the battle is already lost. Hyrule's champions lose their lives, and the divine beasts fall silent with the deceased spirits of the champions trapped inside. The guardians turn against them, and Hyrule collapses. The next memory, titled Despair, captures the aftermath. Zelda and Link run for their lives, pursued by the very machines meant to defend them. Zelda stumbles, and in that moment, everything she's ever fought for feels meaningless. Her research, her prayers, her desperate attempts to awaken her power, none of it was enough. The kingdom has fallen, the people she cared for are gone, and she can do nothing to stop it. But Link doesn't lose courage. Even as the Guardians close in, even as the odds grow impossibly slim, he keeps fighting. Barely able to stand, he grips the Master Sword tighter, stepping forward, ready to give his everything and even lay down his life to protect Zelda. The Guardian locks onto him, preparing to unleash a killing blow, and then In Japanese, Zelda screams at Link to not die, and she begs him to stay alive. There's an inherent emotional rawness here, not just in the words themselves, but in the way she says them. She's not just pleading, she's begging. At this moment, it feels like everything is crashing down around her. Now, this emotion is present in both the English and Japanese versions, but to me, the desperation in her voice voice feels much stronger in Japanese. One big reason for that is the type of language she uses. Up until this point, Zelda has spoken almost exclusively in formal speech, especially with Link. That's completely natural for someone of her status. She is a princess after all, but in this moment, all of that formality completely disappears. The way she speaks is pure and personal. Her true feelings are finally breaking through. In Japanese culture, dropping formal speech, especially for someone like Zelda, carries a lot of emotional weight. It's a sign that her personal feelings, her Ninjo, have overpowered her sense of duty or Giri. For a princess to show this kind of vulnerability, to completely abandon the structured way she usually speaks, makes this moment hit even harder. But what's interesting is that in English, the scene takes on a different kind of emotional weight. Instead of pleading, Zelda reassures Link. She tells him, "You're going to be just fine." It's a subtle but important shift. Instead of focusing on her own fear and desperation, she's found her courage. There's no doubt Zelda is scared for Link, but this isn't just a moment of emotional release, it's a moment of transformation. This is where Zelda fully steps into her role, not just as a princess, but as someone who can protect, instead of always being protected. Immediately after, she doesn't hesitate. She takes charge, orders the guards to bring Link into the Shrine of Resurrection, and moves forward. I really love how the English version highlights her growth, how quickly she switches from despair to determination. This is the moment she's been waiting for, the moment she can finally protect the people and kingdom she cares so much about and fulfill her Ninjo, her personal feelings. Neither version is strictly better than the other, but what's fascinating is how each language brings out something a little different in Zelda's character. The Japanese version leans into raw emotion, the sheer weight of everything she's feeling. The English version highlights her resilience and her ability to now step up and take control when it matters most. Both perspectives really do complement each other beautifully, and they add to Breath of the Wild's narrative and give us a deeper understanding of Zelda's personal journey, not just as a princess with the sealing power of legend, but as an individual who has now connected with her personal feelings and found her courage. This theme of growth and resilience also extends to something Zelda says in an earlier memory, her conversation about her favorite flower, the Silent Princess. In English, she reflects on its strength.
All that we can hope is that the species will be strong enough to prosper on its own.
It is a hopeful statement, one that mirrors her own journey, a princess who has struggled, who wants to grow, and who hopes to finally find the strength to stand on her own. It reinforces the idea of independence, survival, and personal growth, which fits beautifully with the transformation we see in her final moments. But in Japanese, the focus is a little different. Instead of emphasizing growth, Zelda expresses something more uncertain.
もしかすると絶滅するかもしれない姫なのです。
It's a much more fragile perspective, in my opinion, one that feels less about strength and more about loss. And when we consider what her final words are to Link, as she pleads for him not to die in the memories, this phrasing takes on a whole new layer of meaning. There's an inherent fear, not just of failure, but of disappearing and being unable to protect her kingdom and losing absolutely everything she holds dear. I want to reiterate that I'm not proposing that one version outright contradicts the other, but rather emphasizing how understanding Discovering both allows us to appreciate an added depth to Zelda's character in different ways. Furthermore, Zelda isn't the only one struggling with the conflict between Giri and Ninjo. Link carries that burden too, and deals with it in a much different way. On the surface, he embodies Giri completely, stoic, silent, unwavering. He does what's expected of him without question, never showing weakness. But through Zelda's diary, we learn that his silence isn't just discipline, it's actually a coping mechanism. The weight of being the chosen hero, the expectations placed upon him, the sheer pressure of having to be strong for everyone, it's left him emotionally scarred. In her journal, Zelda writes about how little by little she's gotten him to open up. She learns that his silence isn't because he has nothing to say, but because he feels he must suppress his own emotions, to endure everything alone because so many eyes are upon him. Zelda realizes she was wrong to assume he had never known hardship, that, just like her, he too has been suffering under the weight of expectation. What's truly beautiful about Breath of the Wild is how Zelda and Link's arcs intertwine through these concepts. Zelda, the silent princess, and Link, the silent hero, are far more alike than they first seem. They are both trapped between duty and personal emotion, between Giri and Ninjo, feeling bound by the roles they must fulfill. And in the end, just as Zelda comes to understand Link's silence, she also begins to understand her own. Before the Calamity, Link was quiet. He shouldered his duty without complaint, facing every challenge with silent resolve. But after surviving a near-death experience thanks to Zelda and awakening in the Shrine of Resurrection 100 years later, something is different. This Link isn't the same. He's much more open and more expressive. Though we don't actively hear it, it also seems he's more talkative too. While we might argue that Link's amnesia might have something to do with this, the knight who once kept everything inside now engages with the world around him in a way he didn't before. In the present day of Breath of the Wild, Link carries an adventure log, a record of his current and past quests. But in the Japanese version, it isn't just a log. It can be interpreted as his own personal diary written from his perspective. I've covered the complexities involved in more detail in a separate video on this channel, so if you're interested in those extra details about how the original language shapes this interpretation, I recommend giving it a watch. But to put it simply, the Japanese text allows the adventure log to be read as if Link himself is keeping track of his journey. This is especially emphasized in the few entries that even include extra expressive personal lines that were not included in the English release. Not because the official localizers were ignorant, but because of how inherently different the English and Japanese languages are. Again, I've made a video talking about the specifics before. Reading the original Japanese version of the adventure log, especially the sections that contain additional exclusive personal and expressive language, reads as if it's Link's own words, which, in my opinion, brings so much more to the weight of his story. Soon after Link awakens, he is entrusted with a mission by the fallen king of Hyrule: defeat Calamity Ganon and free his daughter, Princess Zelda, from its grasp. But Link isn't just recovering his strength throughout his journey, he is also retracing his past, piecing together fragments of his lost memories. Guided by Impa, he visits 13 locations across Hyrule, each holding echoes of the bond he once shared with Zelda. After recovering all of his forgotten memories, Link records his final thoughts in his journal. And in this entry, we get perhaps the clearest insight into what truly matters to him. Link's purpose isn't just about fulfilling a duty or meeting expectations. It goes beyond that. It's something deeply personal. In the context of Link's silence, his burdens, and everything he has endured, what he writes in his journal speaks volumes. His duty is to protect the kingdom, but his Ninjo, his personal wish lies elsewhere. He doesn't just fight for Hyrule, he fights to defeat the Calamity, ultimately save Princess Zelda, and see her smile with his own very eyes once more.